In 712 CE, a Japanese court scholar named No Yasumaro completed a text that had taken years to compile. The Empress Geme had ordered him to write down the oral traditions of the imperial lineage before they were lost. The result was the Kojiki, Japan's oldest surviving book. It recorded creation myths, divine wars, and the origin of the Japanese islands. When modern researchers compared the Kojiki line by line against the Mesopotamian tablets of Enki, they identified 5 structural parallels so specific that coincidence became difficult to defend. These are the 5 signs. And the 5th one describes something that has already begun. The Kojiki survives as a physical manuscript. The oldest complete copy sits in the Shinpukuji Temple archive in Nagoya, Japan, dating to 1371. Scholars have studied this text for centuries. In 1882, Basil Hall Chamberlain of the Asiatic Society of Japan published the first full English translation. In 1968, Donald Philippi of the University of Tokyo Press produced the academic edition that researchers still cite today. The text is not obscure, it is not hidden. It is the foundational narrative of Japanese civilization, and Shinto shrines across the country still recite passages from it during ceremonies. The priests who chant these words treat them the way Babylonian priests treated the Enuma Elish. They recite them as sacred truth. 5,000 miles west of Japan, and roughly 2,000 years earlier, scribes in ancient Mesopotamia were carving cuneiform into clay tablets that told the story of a god named Enki. In Sumerian, he was Enki. In Akkadian, he became Ea. His domain was fresh water, wisdom, magic, and the survival of the human species. Enki appears across multiple texts spanning 2 millennia of Mesopotamian writing. The Eridu Genesis from roughly 1600 BCE, the Atrahasis epic from 1700 BCE, Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. In every account, Enki plays the same role. He is the one god in the divine council who sides with humanity. When the other gods vote to destroy the human race, Enki finds a way to deliver a warning. Samuel Noah Kramer of the University of Chicago spent decades documenting this pattern. He called Enki the friend of man. The tablets that contain his stories are physical objects. You can visit the British Museum in London or the University of Pennsylvania Museum in Philadelphia and see them behind glass. In 2012, a Harvard professor named Michael Witzel published a book through Oxford University Press called The Origins of the World's Mythologies. Witzel is a Sanskritist who spent years mapping mythological structures across civilizations. He identified a pattern he called Laurasian mythology. This is a shared narrative template that appears in Japan, Mesopotamia, Greece, India, and Northern Europe. The template follows a specific sequence. Creation from primordial waters, a generation of divine beings, conflict among those beings, the creation of humans from divine material, a flood or destruction event. Both the Kojiki and the Enki cycle follow this exact sequence. Witzel argued the pattern traces back 40,000 years to populations migrating out of Africa. His work is peer-reviewed and published by one of the most respected academic presses in the world. The parallels between Japan and Mesopotamia are not fringe speculation. They sit in mainstream scholarship. The question scholars are still debating is what those parallels mean. The first sign is water. The Kojiki opens before the physical world exists. In the beginning, there is only the high plane of heaven and a formless expanse below. The first gods emerge, but the earth has not yet taken shape. Then 2 deities receive a command. Izanagi and Izanami stand on the floating bridge of heaven and look down at the churning ocean beneath them. They thrust a jeweled spear into the brine and stir. When they pull the spear back up, the drops of salt water that fall from its tip solidify into the first island, Onogoroshima. The physical world begins as an act performed upon primordial water. 5,000 miles away and centuries earlier, Mesopotamian scribes recorded their own version of the same structure. Before heaven and earth existed, there was only Apsu and Tiamat. Apsu was fresh water. Tiamat was the salt sea. From their mingling came the first gods. Enki's domain was the Abzu, the freshwater abyss beneath the earth from which all life-giving water flowed. Creation in the Mesopotamian tradition does not precede water. Creation emerges from water. The gods come first, the physical world comes second, and the mechanism of creation is an act performed upon a primordial ocean. Mircea Eliade, the Romanian historian of religion who spent decades at the University of Chicago, catalogued what he called the cosmic waters motif across dozens of cultures. In his 1958 book, Patterns in Comparative Religion, he flagged the Japan and Mesopotamia parallel as one of the most structurally precise examples. Both traditions place divine beings above a formless water. Both traditions produce the physical world through direct manipulation of that water. Both traditions treat the ocean not as a setting, but as a raw material. Scholars who favor independent invention argue that civilizations built near water naturally attribute creative power to it. Scholars who follow Witzel argue the parallel is too specific for coincidence. The debate is open, but the first sign is documented in published academic literature. The second sign is the divine pair. The Kojiki records Izanagi and Izanami as male and female creators who produce the Japanese islands and then generate an entire pantheon of kami. Their creation follows a ritual. They circle a sacred pillar. They speak prescribed words. When Izanami speaks first, the offspring is deformed. A child called Hiruko, the leech child, is born without bones and is set adrift. The pair must restart the ritual with Izanagi speaking first. Only then do the islands and the kami emerge correctly. Creation has rules. Breaking those rules produces consequences. In the Sumerian text, known as Enki and Ninhursag, dated to roughly 2100 BCE and translated by Samuel Noah Kramer, Enki and the goddess Ninhursag form a divine creating pair. Their union produces generation after generation of new deities. But when Enki violates the rules of their arrangement by eating sacred plants that Ninhursag had grown, she curses him with illness. 8 parts of his body wither. Only when the other gods intervene does Ninhursag relent and heal him. The same structure holds. A divine male and female pair create through a process that has strict procedural rules. When one partner violates those rules, the result is deformity, illness, or punishment. Joseph Campbell compared Izanagi and Izanami to Mesopotamian divine pairs in his 1962 book, Oriental Mythology. He noted the pillar-circling ritual as a possible variant of the Mesopotamian sacred marriage rite, a ceremony documented in temple records from Ur and Uruk. 2 civilizations separated by the entire Asian continent recorded a divine couple who build the world through ritual union and who face consequences when the ritual goes wrong. That parallel alone would fill a dissertation. But the Kojiki's next chapter contains something that makes scholars of comparative mythology pause for a different reason entirely. The third sign is the descent. Izanami dies. She gives birth to the fire god Kagutsuchi, and the flames consume her. Izanagi, stricken with grief, kills the fire god in rage. Then he does something no living being is supposed to do. He descends to Yomi no Kuni, the land of the dead, to bring his wife back. He finds her in the darkness. She speaks to him, but tells him not to look at her. She says she has already eaten the food of the underworld and must negotiate with the gods of Yomi for her release. She tells him to wait. He does not wait. He breaks a tooth from his hair comb and sets it alight as a torch. In the flickering flame, he sees Izanami's body. Maggots crawl through her rotting flesh. 8 thunder deities have taken up residence in her decomposing limbs, 1 in her head, 1 in her chest, 1 in each arm and leg and belly and groin. She is no longer the goddess he married. She is a corpse, animated by rage. Izanami screams at him for shaming her. She sends the hags of Yomi to chase him. Izanagi flees up the passage between the worlds. He hurls peaches at his pursuers. The text specifies the fruit. Peaches. He reaches the entrance to the living world and seals it with a massive boulder. Standing on opposite sides, Izanami makes a vow. Every day she will kill 1,000 living people. Izanagi replies, every day he will cause 1,500 to be born. Life and death are separated. The underworld is sealed. The living world survives, but only by a margin of 500 per day. On the other side of the ancient world, Mesopotamian scribes recorded the descent of Inanna. In this text, dated to roughly 1900 to 1600 BCE, the goddess Inanna travels to the underworld to visit her sister Ereshkigal. She passes through 7 gates. At each gate, she is stripped of one article of clothing or jewelry. By the time she reaches Ereshkigal, she is naked and powerless. Ereshkigal kills her. Inanna's corpse is hung on a hook. The living world above begins to wither without her. Enki intervenes. He creates 2 small beings from the dirt beneath his fingernails and sends them to the underworld with the food and water of life. They revive Inanna. But the underworld demands a substitute. Someone must take her place. Inanna returns to the surface, and her husband Dumuzid is eventually sent below in her stead. The structural overlap is dense. A deity descends to the underworld. The underworld has rules that bind anyone who enters. Eating the food of the dead traps you there. The returning deity is changed. The boundary between life and death is sealed or guarded. A substitute or a cost is required. The same motif appears in Greek mythology, with Persephone eating pomegranate seeds in the realm of Hades. 3 traditions across 3 continents recording the same architecture of death and return. Nelly Naumann, the German scholar of Japanese prehistory, argued that the Yomi narrative encodes volcanic and seismic imagery specific to the Japanese islands. The thunder deities in Izanami's body, the boulder sealing an underground passage. These could reflect the geological reality of a civilization built on fault lines and active volcanoes. But Naumann also acknowledged that the structural similarity to Near Eastern descent myths remains, in her word, striking. She published this assessment in her 2000 book on Japanese prehistory through the Harasowitz Academic Press. The parallel is not a fringe observation. It sits in the work of a respected specialist. 3 signs deep. Each one has mapped a structural parallel between 2 civilizations that mainstream history says had no direct contact. The first 2 parallels have conventional explanations. Many cultures tell stories about water and divine couples. But the underworld descent is specific. The food rule, the sealed boundary, the cost of return. The precision increases with each sign. And sign 4 moves from creation stories to something more urgent. It moves to warnings. In Japanese tradition, the kami are not distant creators who set the world in motion and then withdrew. They are active, present, and dangerous when offended. The Kojiki records what happens when a kami is ignored. Susanoo, the storm god and brother of the sun goddess Amaterasu, commits a series of desecrations. He destroys rice paddies at harvest time. He flays a divine horse and throws the carcass into the weaving hall where Amaterasu works. He defiles sacred spaces. Amaterasu responds by retreating into a cave. The Ama no Iwato, the heavenly rock cave. When the sun goddess withdraws, the entire world goes dark. Crops fail. Evil spirits multiply. The 800 kami gather outside the cave in desperation and devise an elaborate scheme involving a mirror, jewels, and a bawdy dance to lure Amaterasu back into the light. The pattern is explicit. A divine being issues warnings through disruption. When those warnings go ignored, the consequence is cosmic. Darkness, death, collapse of the natural order. Restoration requires collective ritual intervention by the remaining gods. The Japanese concept of Tatari, documented by Mark Twain and John Breen in their 2010 book, A New History of Shinto, describes divine retribution from angered or neglected kami. Natural disasters, plagues, military defeats. Japanese communities attributed all of these to kami whose warnings had been missed or dismissed. The Mesopotamian tradition operates on the same architecture. In the Atrahasis epic, the divine council meets and votes to destroy humanity through plague, then drought, then flood. The gods have grievances. Humans are too noisy, too numerous, too disruptive. But Enki dissents. He does not have the authority to override the council, so he works through indirect channels. He warns his human protege by speaking to a reed wall. The other gods have sworn an oath of secrecy. Enki technically obeys the oath because he addresses the wall, not the man standing behind it. The warning is real. The method is indirect. The survival of the species depends on one person recognizing what the god is communicating. Jean Bottero of the École pratique des hautes études in Paris documented the Mesopotamian Divine Council as a political body. Gods voted. Gods disagreed. Factions formed. In his 2001 book, Religion in Ancient Mesopotamia, Bottero showed that Enki consistently occupied the role of the dissenter who found loopholes to protect human life. The parallel to Japanese kami warnings is structural. In both traditions, divine beings warn before they destroy. The warnings come through indirect channels, natural signs, ritual disruptions, behavioral signals. And in both traditions, the species that survives is the one that recognized the warning for what it was. That brings us to the fifth sign, and this is the one that connects to the present. Enki's flood warning is the most famous scene in Mesopotamian literature. The Atrahasis tablets record it in language that has survived 3,700 years. Wall, listen to me. Read wall, observe all my words. Destroy your house, build a boat. Andrew George of the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London published the definitive translation of the Gilgamesh version in 2003 through Oxford University Press. In that version, the god Ea delivers the same warning to a man named Utnapishtim. The flood is coming. The divine council has decided. Build a vessel. Load it with the seed of all living things. The warning is specific. The deadline is real. The destruction is total for everyone who does not act. The Kojiki does not contain a single flood narrative matching the Mesopotamian account in its precise form. This is where the parallel becomes more complex and, for many scholars, more interesting. The Kojiki encodes destruction and renewal not as one catastrophic event, but as a recurring cycle. Izanami dies, and the underworld is sealed. Amaterasu retreats, and the world goes dark. Susanoo is banished, and the heavens are purged. Each episode follows the same pattern: cosmic rupture, collective crisis, ritual restoration. The world breaks and is remade. It breaks again and is remade again. The cycle does not stop. Beyond the Kojiki, Okinawan oral traditions preserve flood narratives that include divine warnings delivered to selected humans before destruction. The folklorist Kunio Yanagita collected these stories in the early 20th century. They are not part of the Kojiki canon, but they belong to the broader substrate of Japanese mythology. In one Okinawan account, a god warns a brother and sister to climb to high ground before the sea rises. They survive. They become the ancestors of humanity. The structure mirrors the Atrahasis account at its most basic level. A divine being warns. A small number listen. The rest perish. And then there is the Mappo doctrine. This is a Buddhist concept of civilizational decline that entered Japanese religious thought through Chinese transmission and layered onto the existing Shinto cyclical cosmology. Japanese scholars calculated that the age of Mappo, the final age of spiritual decay, began in 1052 CE. From that date forward, the traditional teachings would lose their power. Warnings would go unheeded. Institutions would corrupt. The natural order would deteriorate. Michel Mara of the University of California documented how Mappo thought saturated Japanese court culture from the Heian period onward in his 1988 paper, published in the Japanese Journal of Religious Studies. The aristocrats of Kyoto built temples, copied sutras, and hoarded relics because they believed the decline had already started. The composite parallel is this. Enki warned one human to prepare for a destruction that the divine council had already authorized. Japanese tradition encodes the same warning architecture across multiple layers. The kami warn through natural disruptions and ritual failures. The Kojiki's narrative structure repeats cycles of rupture and renewal. Okinawan flood myths preserve the motif of a divine warning delivered to a chosen few. And the Mappo doctrine declares that the final age of decline is not approaching. It began nearly 1,000 years ago. Both traditions describe a species that was given warnings before each phase of destruction. Both traditions suggest that the warnings are embedded in the natural and spiritual environment for anyone willing to recognize them. Both traditions treat the failure to listen as the mechanism of catastrophe. 5 signs, 2 civilizations. One pattern that either traveled the ancient world through routes scholars have not yet mapped, or was invented independently by peoples who had no reason to tell the same story. The Kojiki has been sitting in Japanese archives for over 1,300 years. The Enki tablets have been in Western museums for over 150 years. Both sets of scribes recorded the same warning. Whether you believe they were preserving history, mythology, or something else entirely, the texts are still there. The question is whether we are listening.